My parents and brother live at my expense, and they call me a selfish person, so I sold the house and left. My name's Alex. I'm 34 and the oldest son in a family from Georgia. My parents used to call me reliable. Not smart, not talented, just reliable. I never heard the kind of praise they showered on my younger brother, Justin. He's 4 years younger and, I swear, was born with a golden halo over his head as far as my parents were concerned. Growing up, the difference in how we were treated was like night and day. I'd be out delivering newspapers at 6 in the morning, saving up every penny to buy my first laptop. Meanwhile, Justin was skipping school, crashing his skateboard, blowing his allowance on the latest iPod or whatever new gaming console he had to have. And my parents? They laughed. Boys will be boys. My family owned this struggling little hardware store in town. It was barely breaking even and constantly drowning in debt. When I was 15, I started helping out after school. Not just sweeping floors or stocking shelves. I took over the books. I taught myself QuickBooks, balanced their accounts, even renegotiated terms with a couple of our suppliers. At one point, we were so behind on rent that I took my savings and gave it to my dad to help cover the shortfall. That savings was supposed to go toward a used car I'd been eyeing for months. But Justin, he was out skateboarding, sometimes literally smashing his board into parked cars and laughing like it was a joke. But it wasn't just the money. It was everything. The way they talked to us, looked at us, what they expected of us. When I got a scholarship to college, it was barely a blip on their radar. Good job, my dad said, without even looking up from his phone. When Justin got a B in geometry, there was a full-on celebration dinner. Balloons. A cake. They even took a photo for Facebook. So proud of our boy. My graduation? My mom forgot to charge the camera. In college, I didn't have the luxury of finding myself. I worked 2 part-time jobs, studied at night, and tried to visit home when I could, mostly to help run the store because my dad's back was getting worse and my mom had picked up a job at the church to help make ends meet. But let me tell you who wasn't helping, Justin. He flunked out of community college, spent a year hopping between random gigs, and then suddenly declared he was moving to LA to make it as a photographer. Guess who paid for the camera? And the flight? And the rent for the first 6 months? Yeah, my parents. Fast forward to when I'm 29. I've got a decent job in logistics. Nothing glamorous, but I'm stable. I've got my own small apartment, finally paid off my student loans, and I'm starting to look into buying a house. That same year, Justin comes back home. His photography dream crashed and burned. Shocking, I know, and he's now figuring things out. Within a week, my parents are reconfiguring the store office so he can have a creative space. They ask me if I can help him get a job at my company. I tell them we're not hiring. That was the first time my mom accused me of being cold. Then there was the big one. My dad had a minor stroke. Scared the hell out of all of us. I rushed home, took unpaid leave, stayed 2 weeks to help get the store running again, took over appointments, even sat down with a financial advisor to restructure some of their debts. Justin, he posted a get well video on Instagram and then went to a music festival the next day. After my dad recovered, he called me into the kitchen one night and told me he wanted me to consider taking over the store. Said it needed someone with a head for business. I said I'd think about it. I actually did. Not because I wanted to, because I thought maybe it would finally mean something. Like, maybe this was them acknowledging all the years I'd kept the place from collapsing. But guess what? 2 weeks later, I get a text from Justin. Excited to be the new face of the store. Gonna rebrand it with some LA vibes. I thought it was a joke. I called my parents and asked what was going on. They told me they wanted to give Justin a chance to grow and that I was too serious to really understand what the store could become. They'd signed the rights to him officially. Not full ownership, but enough control that he could run it however he wanted. They didn't even tell me. He ran it into the ground in less than a year. Started spending on things like neon signs, a smoothie bar in the corner, and online ads featuring himself shirtless holding power tools. I wish I was making that up. Within 6 months, the store was losing more money than ever before. He missed tax filings, burned bridges with vendors I'd spent years building relationships with. And when it all blew up, my parents called me crying, asking if I could take a look at the books. I didn't answer right away. I sat on that message for 2 days. In the end, I did help, because I'm not built to watch people drown. I helped them do damage control, filed an emergency extension with the IRS, contacted the vendors, and got them to at least listen. But I made it clear, I'm not saving this place again. I'm not stepping back and just so Justin can burn it down next year. That was the first time my parents looked at me like I wasn't just reliable. My dad told me, I don't know what we'd do without you. And for the first time, I didn't feel pride. I felt tired. I'm 34 now. I've just put an offer on a house a few towns over. Quiet place. I didn't tell my family until after the inspection came through. When I told them, my mom asked if I'd still come by on weekends to help with the books. Justin, who's now running a YouTube channel for DIY home renovation, told me I was abandoning the family legacy. I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because for once, I'm building something for myself. And I'm not looking back. I literally saved that store more times than I can count. When I was in high school, I stayed late after hours calculating margins, negotiating with suppliers, making sure inventory didn't disappear into thin air like it always used to when my dad ran things solo. I kept the books clean, helped them transition from shoebox accounting to proper software, and even handled our taxes by the time I was 17. I did all that not because I had some romantic vision of taking over the family business someday, but because I didn't want to see us lose the roof over our heads. Meanwhile, my father called himself a meat chef and spent thousands, literally thousands, on barbecue equipment that he used maybe 3 times a year. There was this whole setup he insisted on getting. A smoker the size of a coffin, imported charcoal, temperature-controlled tongs, the works. He bought a branded apron with Grill Commander, embroidered on the front, and wore it like it meant something. He'd stand out there in the driveway with his Bluetooth speaker blaring country music and tell anyone who'd listened that real business was about passion. I'd be inside trying to figure out how to delay payroll because the checking account was $600 short. My mom was no better. She had this thing for porcelain figurines. Said they made the store feel classy. She'd use store credit to buy them wholesale from this supplier in Savannah and fill up 2 whole display cases, even though we couldn't move a single one of them. No one wanted fragile ballerinas and Victorian ladies with chipped paint in a hardware store, but she was convinced they added elegance. I tried explaining that they were a money sink and that we'd sold maybe 4 of them in 2 years, but she just waved me off and told me I didn't understand aesthetics. Then she'd go back to polishing them like we were running a boutique gallery and not a shop that sold plumbing fixtures and sandpaper. And all the while, when I talked about college, they went quiet. Not disapproving exactly, just distant, like I'd brought up something irrelevant. When I finally got into a decent computer programming program in Arkansas, it was like the air changed in the house. No congratulations, no offer to help with tuition, not even a single shopping trip for dorm supplies. My dad said, "Well, you're good with numbers. I guess that makes sense." My mom asked if I was still planning on working weekends at the store during breaks. I packed for college with money I earned tutoring other students and washing cars. I left with 2 suitcases and a beat-up Lenovo that I'd upgraded myself, every spare part paid for out of my own pocket. Not even 2 months later, they took out a loan to buy Justin a motorcycle. A brand new Yamaha. It had chrome detailing and this ridiculous exhaust system that rattled windows whenever he revved it. I found out about it through Facebook. Justin posted a photo of himself posing next to it with the caption, "Live fast, stay wild." I didn't even know they were considering a loan. I called home and asked what the hell was going on, and my mom said, "He's young, Alex. He should live while he's young." I just stood there in my dorm hallway holding the phone, trying not to let my voice shake. I was living off instant ramen and buying secondhand textbooks online, and they were financing his need for freedom on 2 wheels. She said it like it was a deep truth, like Justin was some philosopher instead of a guy who hadn't held a job longer than 3 weeks. That was when I really understood what I was to them. I was the insurance policy, the backup plan, the person they could count on to show up and fix things, not someone whose life deserved investment. They spent years saying, "We're a team," but the only team they ever played for was Team Justin. My sacrifices were invisible, expected, like background noise. I didn't complain, not to their faces anyway. I just kept moving forward, doing what I had to do. But that was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever see me the way they saw him. When I finally landed a job at a solid IT company in Austin, pulling in a salary of $160,000 a year, I genuinely thought I had made it out of the mess for good. I was 31, had my own apartment, a reliable car, and enough left over each month to actually save instead of just scrape by. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without immediately calculating the next financial disaster waiting around the corner. I should have known better. The first call came just 3 weeks into my new job. My dad, with that same tone he always used when he wanted something, said they were behind on their store lease again and asked if I could spot them just $2,000 to tide things over until next month. He said it like it was nothing, like $2,000 was spare change now that I was a computer guy. I wired the money and told myself it was a one-time thing, but it never stopped. A month later, it was $3,500 for overdue inventory payments. Then it was $4,800 because the IRS had sent a notice and they needed to cover some penalty fees and avoid a lien. And every time, it came with this little guilt hook. "You're doing so well now, son, and we just need a little help to stay afloat." I stopped counting after the 5th payment, but I know I handed over more than $15,000 in that first year alone. I wasn't even living lavishly myself. No flashy car, no expensive furniture, just rent, food, and trying to rebuild some semblance of a life that didn't revolve around the family's constant state of emergency. And then I'd open Instagram or Facebook and see photos of Justin at some EDM festival in Nevada, smiling with a brand new $2,000 DSLR around his neck, captioned with something stupid like, "Catching light, chasing life." My mom, who claimed they were one bad week away from shutting the doors on the store, posted a selfie with a designer handbag I know cost at least $1,200 because my ex had the same one. No explanations, no apologies. Just shiny, curated snapshots of a life that looked nothing like desperation. At one point, I started asking questions, not even harsh ones, just basic stuff like, "Hey, I sent $3,500 last month, and now you're saying there's another late payment? Can you show me the breakdown?" That's when things turned. My dad went quiet for a few days, and when he finally called back, his voice was stiff. He said, "We just thought you'd trust us, Alex. We didn't expect you to become a money grubber." A money grubber. That word hit like a slap. I had spent years bailing them out, skipping vacations, putting off replacing my laptop, all because I didn't want them to drown, and now I was the greedy one for daring to ask where my money went. Even my mom got in on it. She called me one evening, and in that passive-aggressive, syrupy way she does, said, "You've changed, sweetheart. Ever since you started making that big salary, you act like we're some kind of burden." I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how helping with their taxes when I was a teenager, giving up my college savings to cover a late rent payment, or wiring thousands to stop the IRS from freezing their account made me selfish. But I didn't. I just sat there in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the bills on my counter that I still hadn't gotten around to paying, and felt like no matter how far I moved, I'd never be free. There were no chains around my ankles, no signed contract saying I owed them anything, but it didn't matter. They pulled on me like I belonged to them, like everything I earned was theirs by extension. Every dollar came with strings. And when I tried to cut those strings, even just a little, I became the bad guy. Not Justin, who hadn't held a steady job since college and was apparently still finding his creative voice. Not my mom, who blew store funds on decorative junk and luxury bags. Me, the guy who kept them from going under more times than I could count. The guy who never once said no, until he started wondering why no one ever said thank you. By the time I turned 32, I was living on one salary, my own, but somehow carrying 5 people on it. There was me, of course, though I barely counted in my own budget. Then there were my parents, still claiming that the store was just a few months from turning around, even as they ignored every piece of financial advice I'd given them for over a decade. Justin, my brother, still hadn't held a consistent job longer than 6 months, but he'd managed to upgrade from dreamer to entrepreneur, thanks to my money. And then there was Cheryl, his girlfriend, who called herself a life coach because she had 4,000 followers on Instagram and once read a book about confidence. They drove around in an SUV that I had financed under my name because Justin's credit was garbage, and mine was the only one that could secure decent terms. The house they lived in was one I had bought originally as an investment, a modest 3-bedroom I fixed up myself on weekends and eventually signed over to myself just to keep it from becoming another chaotic mess like the store. But they treated it like it was their family inheritance, not something I paid for brick by brick. Every week, they stocked the fridge with gourmet food from Amazon Fresh, stuff like imported brie, grass-fed lamb chops, and specialty oat milk that cost more than my monthly data plan. While I sat at my office desk slurping noodles out of a styrofoam cup because I didn't want to waste time or money on delivery. They lived in comfort. I lived in obligation. My mother would text me links to cute things for the kitchen or some new throw pillows she wanted to brighten up their space. And when I didn't respond, she'd follow up with, "We wouldn't ask if it weren't important." My dad, somehow still clinging to his title as head of the family despite having zero income and even less accountability, would pull me aside when I visited and say things like, "I hope you remember how grateful you are for everything we gave you." And every single time he said it, I wanted to scream. Because what exactly was I supposed to be grateful for? The fact that I'd spent my childhood watching them fumble the store into the ground while I tried to fix it? That I missed school trips and new clothes because every extra dollar went into keeping the electricity on at home? That I learned to file taxes before I learned how to drive, just so the IRS wouldn't show up on our doorstep again? They didn't sacrifice anything for me. They sacrificed me for themselves. I was the kid who didn't get a summer, didn't get a break, didn't get a shot at just being young. I spent my teen years being their accountant, their negotiator, their translator for things they couldn't be bothered to understand, while Justin got skateboards and gas money and the benefit of the doubt every time he messed up. And now I was the one still paying the price, so they could pretend we were all in this together. But we weren't. I was just the wallet. And no one, not my parents, not my brother, not Cheryl with her inspirational posts about manifesting abundance, ever seemed to notice that the abundance was coming from me. When my cousin Nick reached out and suggested we have a family reconciliation dinner, I said yes, even though every part of me was screaming to say no. I knew what would happen if I refused. Another round of whispered comments in family group chats, more accusations that I was cold, ungrateful, holding a grudge, always making things difficult. They'd paint me as the monster again, the bitter one, the drama. So I agreed, not because I believed in reconciliation, but because I was tired of being the villain in their story. We met at a high-end restaurant downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting, heavy menus, and prices that don't make sense unless someone else is paying. But of course, that someone was me. As usual, I'd made the reservation, paid the deposit, and nodded politely when the hostess said, "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Carter," like this was some big celebration and not a trap I had willingly walked into. My mom was already seated when I arrived, sipping a cocktail with her purse neatly placed on the empty chair next to her like it deserved a seat more than I did. My dad showed up 10 minutes late, wearing the same blazer he pulls out for anything he considers important, the one with frayed cuffs and barbecue sauce stains he thinks no one can see. Justin and Cheryl breezed in together, dressed like influencers, as if the whole evening was a red carpet event. Cheryl wore this ridiculous silk scarf and kept taking selfies under the excuse of capturing the moment. Nick was last, trying to play mediator, smiling too wide and making small talk, while everyone pretended we weren't all here to dig through a decade of resentment. I ordered a glass of Chardonnay, the cheapest one they had, which still cost $18, and tried to brace myself for whatever speech my father had rehearsed. The conversation started light, with Cheryl going on about her client load and Justin telling some story about meeting a music producer in Colorado who loved his photography. My mom smiled politely. My dad sat back, arms crossed, chewing steak like it had wronged him. I stayed mostly quiet, letting them perform. And then, halfway through the main course, after the second round of drinks had loosened everyone up, my father leaned forward and said it like he was reciting a family proverb. "Justin is the soul of the family," he said. "He brings us together. He's got that light about him. And Alex has always been selfish." I don't know if he expected applause or if he just needed to get it off his chest, but for a moment the table went completely still. My mom said nothing, not even a glance in my direction. She just lowered her eyes like this was some funeral and not a gut punch. Justin smirked into his wine glass like it was all finally out in the open, like justice had been served with the roasted duck. I stared at my plate, then back at him, and I could feel something solid click into place in my chest, like a lock I hadn't realized was still open. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene. I just stood up, pushed my chair in slowly, and said clearly enough for the whole table to hear, "That was the last meal on me." And then I walked out. The morning after that dinner, I sat in my kitchen with a black coffee and opened my laptop. I didn't pace, didn't second guess, didn't stew over what had been said. I just opened my contact list and dialed my lawyer. I told him plainly, "We're done playing caretaker. The house. We're selling it." I had the title, I had the deed, and I had the leverage. I gave him the green light to list it immediately, no warning to the people inside. As far as I was concerned, they were tenants squatting in a property they never appreciated. The car? That SUV they drove around like it was a gift from the heavens? It was in my name. I told my lawyer to initiate repossession. They'd ignored every conversation about insurance, registration, and maintenance for years, treating it like a family asset when it was my responsibility and my liability. Enough of that. The guarantor credit cards I stupidly co-signed on during one of Justin's responsible phases, we closed them. Full stop. No more transactions, no more late-night Amazon binges, no more surprise calls from banks asking if I recognized a $700 charge for professional branding services in Cheryl's name. Then I started calling the utilities. Internet, gone. Gas, water, electricity. Each one shut off with a polite but firm request to terminate service. I didn't leave a note, didn't explain. I owed them nothing. Every monthly bill that had quietly drained my account while they lived in comfort was now off my plate. I took screenshots of every confirmation email and saved them in a folder labeled closure. As for the store, I didn't even bother calling. I had warned them for years that I wouldn't keep bailing them out. I didn't show up. I didn't text. I simply forwarded their latest IRS letter to a business liquidation agency and deleted the rest. The store wasn't my problem anymore. Let them figure out what a soul of the family can do with unpaid taxes and zero cash flow. No one even realized what was happening at first. They were still waking up late, scrolling on their phones, brewing their single-origin coffee while their life support system was already being unplugged. The house they thought was theirs was on the market before noon. The car they drove was already tagged in the system. The internet they used to post self-righteous quotes about family loyalty disappeared before they could upload another story. I didn't send a message or make a dramatic announcement. I just removed myself from the machine they'd been feeding off for years. Quietly, efficiently, and completely. They broke into my office on a Tuesday morning, around 9:15, right as I was getting settled at my desk. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when I heard shouting echoing through the lobby. At first, I thought it was a client or maybe some unstable visitor causing a scene, but then I heard my name, loud and unmistakable. I stood up and looked over the glass divider and saw two security guards trying to hold back my father and Justin as they shoved their way past reception. My father was red in the face, wild-eyed, yelling about betrayal and family and something about selling the house out from under us. Justin was throwing words around too, calling me a thief, demanding I fix this like I was some employee who forgot to clock in. The receptionist was frozen, eyes wide, phone trembling in her hand as she tried to dial security while my boss stood nearby, in complete disbelief. Before I could make it to the front to intercept them, my father broke free and started pounding on my office door. I didn't open it. I watched from a distance as he screamed at the glass, spit flying, fists clenched like he was daring someone to stop him. Security finally managed to drag them both outside, but it didn't end there. As they were being escorted through the parking lot, my father spotted my car, the black SUV I had bought brand new last year for $47,000 after working overtime for 3 straight quarters, and completely lost it. He grabbed a piece of metal from a construction bin across the lot and started smashing the windshield, then the side mirrors, then the hood. He was yelling my name the entire time, like this was somehow going to make me come outside and reverse everything. Justin stood nearby, not stopping him, not saying a word, just watching. By the time the police arrived, my car looked like it had been through a riot. The windshield was caved in, the paint was scraped down to bare metal, and glass littered the pavement. Everything was caught on the building's security cameras, and a few of my coworkers had pulled out their phones as well. The police charged both of them on the spot with hooliganism and property damage, and security detained them until the patrol car showed up. My father tried to argue, said I owed him, said this was family business, but no one was listening. Back inside, the entire office had come to a standstill. People were still gathered near the front windows, watching the aftermath in silence. My boss looked at me with a mix of sympathy and pure confusion. One of my colleagues, Jeremy, who sat 2 rows over and usually only talked to me about coffee beans or fantasy football, walked past my desk later that day and said, "Your father did this? Holy shit." He wasn't even trying to be rude. It was just the only thing left to say. 2 weeks after everything came crashing down, I agreed to meet with them again, not out of sentiment, but because I needed to see for myself what the fallout looked like. We met in the back booth of a diner near the highway, one of those places where the lights are too bright and the coffee tastes like it's been reheated since dawn. My father looked like he had aged 10 years. His shirt was wrinkled. His hands trembled when he picked up the sugar packet, and he couldn't meet my eyes. My mother was already crying when I walked in, dabbing at her face with a crumpled napkin like she'd been doing it on and off all morning. Justin sat with his head down, no phone in his hand, no smart watch on his wrist, not even his usual cocky smirk. He looked empty. Cheryl was gone. She had left him 2 days earlier and posted something cryptic about cutting ties with toxic energy that someone forwarded to me. I didn't ask where she went. They were staying in a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with stains on the walls and vending machines that only take exact change. They told me they hadn't had hot water in 3 days. My mom said they'd pawned what little jewelry she had left. My dad said they couldn't afford gas to get to a food bank that weekend. They were broken, and I don't mean that as a metaphor. They were physically, emotionally, financially shattered. And now they wanted forgiveness. They cried while they asked for it. My mother reached across the table for my hand, and I pulled mine back. My father said he hadn't been himself, that it was the stress, the pressure, the betrayal he thought he felt. Justin whispered something about mistakes, about trying to grow up, about Cheryl always being the one who pushed things too far. I listened to all of it without saying a word. Then, when the silence settled, I told them what I was willing to offer. I said I could provide a roof again, a place to live. One of the smaller properties my company managed, nothing special, but clean and safe. I would pay for it myself, but it wasn't going to be a gift. If they wanted help, they'd have to earn it. I told them all 3 would work for my property management company. Minimum wage was $14 in our city. I said I'd pay them $15 an hour. No titles, no special treatment, no exceptions. And then I turned to my father and said the final part. He had to plead guilty in court. There was a hearing scheduled for the property damage, and I made it clear, if he tried to argue it, If he pleaded not guilty and dragged it into some pathetic legal drama, then the deal was off. I told him flat out. I didn't care what story he told himself about what happened in that parking lot. I only cared that he stood in front of a judge and took responsibility, on record, in public, for what he did. Without that, there would be nothing. No job, no housing, no second chance. He looked at me for a long time, like he wanted to say no, like he still believed he was in charge. But the motel had burned through that illusion. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. He said yes. They all agreed. Now my father mows the lawn. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, he pushes the mower from one end of the property to the other under the sun. No complaints, no shortcuts, because he knows the rules. Justin is assigned to maintenance and sanitation. He cleans out the sewer grates, handles garbage runs, scrubs out the dumpsters when needed. My mother works in the laundry room of one of our older apartment complexes, folding sheets, wiping down machines, and sorting through lint traps that haven't been cleaned in years. Their wages are clocked by the hour, and every cent goes directly toward the rent of the unit they occupy. There is no access to cash, no allowance, no discretionary spending. They live by the book because I made the book. Every task is logged. Every absence is questioned. Every supply they use is tracked. It's not about revenge or humiliation. It's about structure. It's about holding them to the same standards I held myself to when I was younger, when no one gave me a safety net. I told them from the beginning, if you break the law, if you steal, if you lie, if you cause problems for tenants or duck responsibilities, you go back to the street. There are no warnings, no second chances. I manage their employment just like I manage anyone else's. I do not check in on them as a son. I oversee them as a landlord and supervisor. I keep the keys. I keep the documents. I monitor the work logs. I do it not because I enjoy control, but because I learned over the years what responsibility actually means. I learned it the hard way, in silence, in debt, in offices where I ate instant noodles while others spent my income on luxuries. I am disciplined now because they never were. And for the first time in my life, I see them working. Not pretending, not improvising, not spinning excuses. Working, sweating, clocking in on time, taking orders. And they do it because they have no other choice. At the next court hearing, my father stood in front of the judge, cleared his throat like he was preparing for a speech, and said, "I was an asshole. I'm sorry, son." He didn't look at me when he said it. His voice didn't shake. His posture didn't slump. There was no emotion behind the words, no weight, no pause that might have signaled real reflection. But it sounded nice, clean, like a man trying to show remorse because someone told him that was the script. The judge nodded. The prosecutor didn't object. And in the end, they gave him a suspended sentence, property damage acknowledged, guilt on the record, but no jail time. Just community service and a few mandatory sessions with a counselor. It was a compromise that left the room quiet and the docket moving. My attorney asked me afterward if I wanted to contest it, to push for something more severe, to make an example out of him. I said no. Not because I forgave him, not because I believed him, and definitely not because I cared about his comfort. I just didn't need revenge anymore. That part of me was gone. The version of myself that needed him to suffer, to crawl, to understand what he had done. That person had walked out of that expensive restaurant months ago and never came back. What I needed was something different. I got what I wanted. I got freedom. Justin is now trying to find a job, really trying this time, or so he says. The truth is, TikTok doesn't feed him anymore. The ad revenue dried up, the sponsorships never came, and the algorithm moved on to someone younger, louder, more outrageous. He scrolls through listings with that dazed look of someone who's realizing, for the first time, that real work doesn't come with hashtags or followers. He's never set foot in a real office, never filled out onboarding forms, never had to sit through performance reviews or worry about HR policies. Every application he sends out comes back like a closed door. My mother picked up a part-time job in a cafe near the complex. She tells the other women there that she's helping out the owner, as if it's some favor she's doing for a friend, but I know the manager hired her because they were short-staffed and desperate. She tries to make coffee, clean tables, and run orders, but every shift looks like hard labor to her. Her hands ache. Her feet swell. She comes home tired and quiet, not because the job is beneath her, but because it demands effort she's not used to giving. They still complain. Of course they do. About the heat, about the schedule, about the people they work with, about the food, the noise, the fact that nothing is like it used to be. Sometimes they mutter things under their breath. Sometimes they say it to my face, as if I'm going to fix it or make it easier. But I don't respond anymore. I don't offer sympathy. I don't offer solutions. I just listen the way you listen to static on a radio you forgot to turn off. Dull, meaningless, background noise. Their comfort is no longer my responsibility. Their routines, their challenges, their disappointments. They belong to them now, not to me. And for the first time in my life, I don't have to hide that. 6 months after everything happened, I rented an apartment in Barbados, a quiet place near the water with nothing but the sound of waves and birds in the morning. I stayed for a full month, waking up without alarms, walking barefoot to the beach, drinking coffee with no one asking for anything. My phone doesn't ring anymore. I changed the numbers, shut down the old email accounts, deleted every app that kept me tied to them. There is no way for them to reach me now unless I choose to be reached, and that is a decision I no longer feel guilty for making. If they ever find a way to contact me again, I will remind them that I have already done more than anyone else would have done. I paid for their survival, absorbed their anger, carried their failures, and gave them chances they never deserved. Their fate, from now on, is only their business. Not mine. Not ever again. And yes, I finally sleep peacefully. Thank you for reading this. I know it was a lot, but I'm curious. What would you have done in my place? Would you have cut things off sooner, or tried to make it work longer? I'd really like to hear your point of view. Let me know what you think.